This is Duke University.
So what I'm going to attempt to do today is tie these different speeches together a little bit with a little bit of an overview. What I really wanted to think about today was how do social entrepreneurship and impact investing interrelate, right? We got these kind of two different ways of thinking, from the entrepreneur's perspective and from an investor's perspective. And I'm going to start with a personal story and then go from there. So back in 1992, I had an invitation to go to lunch with the president of a prominent private foundation in New York. His name was Lloyd Morissette, and he was the co-founder of Sesame Street, along with a woman named Joan Gantz Cooney. He had founded Sesame Street and the then named Children's Television Workshop 25 years before. I think I was 23 at the time. And I was quite impressed. I realized through the conversation, I had a lot of experience in watching this program. I had grown up with it myself. I was 2 when it started coming on the air, so I was the exact generation. My brother is 7 years younger than I am, so I watched it again with him. I can sing every verse of the Rubber Ducky song. Grover taught me to count to 10 in Spanish, do a lot of things. But what was really impressive is I realized that this man had started an organization that taught me and everyone else of my generation how to read, which was stunning. I was really excited, and I was really intimidated. And I come to realize now this is my first encounter with a real social entrepreneur. So it gets even better because it wasn't just a lunch, it was a job interview. And I said, what does your foundation do? And he said, well, I'm the 6th president of a foundation that was started by colleagues of JP Morgan and Andrew Carnegie. And today, we think of ourselves as social venture capitalists. And I had been a French literature major, and I could quote Rousseau to you, and I had been working in policy in DC, and I could tell you about public service obligations of broadcasters. I had absolutely no idea what he was talking about. Decided it was best to admit that. And he said, oh, let me tell you about it. He said, what we do is we take our capital and we put ideas and people together at the right time to create social change. Venture capitalists create financial returns, but we create social change. And I have never forgotten this formula, and I actually want to use it to talk a little bit about the state of things today and how we can make this work. But the conversation that we had was, and I do want to talk about this a little bit, was about Sesame Street and how this worked. So Lloyd at the time was a program officer at the Carnegie Corporation, and Joan Gantz Cooney was a television producer, and she said, I have this idea. I think that we can actually teach kids through TV. Now, Head Start had been around for a year or two, was having some promising results, extremely expensive to reach inner city kids. It's like the last mile problem that we talk about in BOP markets, only here in our own country, right? You have to get them there, you have to make sure that they're ready. Here it was, could we actually beam this directly to their living rooms and get people to learn that way? So here we have this notion, could we use the platform of mass media with the creativity of some of these producers, and could we actually increase kindergarten readiness through this program? So I'm guessing that most of the people in this room weren't around in the mid-70s, just a guess. But Sesame Street was the only educational program on TV. It was on twice a day, in the morning and then rebroadcast again in the afternoon so you wouldn't miss it. They experimented with all sorts of things like repeating throughout the week and so on. The significant thing about this was realizing how quickly this took off. So they had a pilot for about 2 years with some foundation funding, and then Carnegie Corporation and the Department of Education each put in $4 million to take this national and to give it a try. So we have this incredible example, and I think what I want to emphasize here is the magic of timing. that they happen to hit that is actually pretty rare, where there was a policy issue going on. The Corporation for Public Broadcasting had just been formed. It was formed with public service obligations, and one of those was around education, and they had nothing to show. Lloyd, my colleague, had partnered with Joan first as a funder, then he became her business planning partner and wrote the business plan, and then he became the salesman. And he actually went out and had meetings with all the major networks to see whether they would carry this program. At the time, there were 3, and they all laughed at him. They said, "We can't sell advertising to children. Get out of my office." PBS didn't. PBS said, "Oh yeah, we need this." Inked the deal immediately, right? Led to the funding, all this sorts of thing happens. So as you can imagine, after he told me this story and I got a job offer, I took the job. Now, here we sit about 20 years later, and I think there are some interesting lessons in kind of how we can see this magic of different things coming together to create social change. So let's go through some of these. So capital, we talked a lot about, and Greg mentioned a little bit around, how do we find adaptive capital that is focused on impact. And I think we're still struggling with what I call the 2-pocket model. I got my market pocket on one side where I'm trying to maximize, and I got my philanthropy pocket on the other side, and I put a little stream every once in a while to the philanthropy, and I feel good about that. The problem is that little stream is actually much smaller, so we end up shortchanging our social change money. What's going on that's interesting in this marketplace is we have more people questioning this model. We have people like Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, Steve and Gene Case saying, you know what? If we're really trying to create change, let's not wait until we're retired. Let's not wait. Let's use all the power that we have today, our networks, our business skills, our relationships with policymakers. And I think what we're going to see over the next 5 years is this whole dynamic becoming significantly different as people think about ways to leverage their capital. Another prediction that I have, and this is based a little bit on some comments by Felix Oldenburg, who's part of the Ashoka Globalizer program. He says we're in a state of benevolent schizophrenia. And what he means by that is our foundations are facing this necessary loss of 100% of every dollar that they put in. And our investors are saying we're not happy until we get above market rate. And he says, you know what? Maybe there's a continuum. Maybe we can design products where maybe there's a probability of a lesser loss or maybe another probability of some sort of higher gain. And I predict we're going to see a lot of experimentation over the next few years trying to slice and dice this and create different products that satisfy different needs of investors trying to figure out how to blend these things. The next one is ideas. Greg has written a lot about the diffusion of innovation. And you can see from Rachel's talk that people who have a deep understanding of how things are working on the ground can start to see leverage points and solutions that other people don't see. At the same time, I guess I would posit that we're entering into a phase where social entrepreneurship is so sexy that in a sense we're going to have a flood of ideas. And it's actually going to be a problem. We need to be able to filter out the ideas that actually work. We need to have, this is not a capital problem, this is a knowledge problem. If I'm an environmental entrepreneur and I've invented a solution for clean energy and I'm trying to sell it in Africa, who do I talk to who has done that? What are the 6 different models that have been tried? We don't have that kind of connectivity, and it's very hard for entrepreneurs to do that. I think, again, over the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to see that kind of adaptive system, as Greg was talking about, developing, where a lot of the incubators and accelerators and so on can start to do that. I think what's critical about that, and one of the reasons I'm so excited about our seed program, is to do it within specific industry and expertise areas so that those nodes can be connected, that those portfolio of options, as Greg said, can be understood. The next thing I want to talk about is people, and we often think of the heroic social entrepreneur as the central agent in this. I like this graphic because it shows kind of the two things that I think are really essential when you think about the people part, which obviously involves all of you in this growing enterprise. One is that it's not all about founders, it's about a team. Every great innovation or set of innovations requires people working together, and it requires them fitting together different sets of skills. And I think we are becoming much more knowledgeable about how to bring different kinds of expertise, not just business and health, business and environment together to start to work on these problems. The other trend that I think is irrefutable is the education part of social entrepreneurship has really been focused on business schools. And I think we're going to see just a dramatic widening of interest in studying social entrepreneurship at the undergraduate level, and that's going to change a lot of the patterns and problems that we can do to develop really fantastic talent and skills for the field. The last thing I want to talk about is timing. And the timing is really not about a clock. What it really is about is kind of the difference between what you're doing yourself and what's going on around you. And it seems to me that this is one of the most critical factors between success and failure for social enterprises and for everyone else on this chain, which is what else needs to happen besides your own enterprise for systemic change to happen? Who are your competitors? Who are your partners? Who is kind of entrenched in the area that you're working with? We have some wonderful writing that Greg and Paul and some other colleagues have done about knowing your ecosystem. That's what this is all about. And I think it's one of these things that becomes kind of one of the most significant factors as we study kind of what's gone right and what's gone wrong, and also somewhat one of the most hard to predict. At the end, the idea of great social change happening, I think that one of the things that I've learned is that it's never one entrepreneur, and it's often not even one idea or set of ideas, it's a generation. So the Sesame Street story I told you, the reason that worked so fast is because people had been working on the policy for public broadcasting for the 5 years before that. They just happened to hit it at the right moment, where it only cost $8 million. I don't think I mentioned to you that one of the grants we gave when I was working at the Markle Foundation was a longitudinal assessment of the value of Sesame Street. Not only does Sesame Street increase the educational attainment for kids in kindergarten, but we study them for 15 years, and they achieve better in high school as a result of watching that show when they're 5. So just an incredible example of this happening, and there are many others that are starting to come to fruition. Greg mentioned B-Lab, which I think of as the same thing. There have been generations of entrepreneurs trying to build in various, the needs of various stakeholders into their business, but someone else came along kind of at the tail and it said, oh, let's wrap that up and make it easy. And now it's running along. I think the same thing for Big Society Capital, which is a movement in the UK to try to institutionalize the investment at a large scale in social enterprise, and is again building on decades of policy work and on-the-ground work to define and support social enterprises in the UK. So my last thought is, so now we have this formula, what can we see in how to maximize it? First of all, I think you can all understand capital is a catalyst. It is not an agent of change. It is dependent on all these other things going right. The people and ideas are the most essential. Bill Drayton talks about the power of an idea in the hand of a social entrepreneur, but that iteration process, that kind of learning how to get it right, is very important. And then I think timing is the gating factor. Well, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, and if you have all these other things right, but you don't have the right timing and you haven't figured that out, you may not get to social change. But then, of course, there are examples where it does work, and when we end up with multiple, with beautiful ripple effects of the kind that we like. So thank you guys for joining us all today. I feel very honored to be part of this team and this school and this university, thinking about how we can use our resources and bridging the generations, Lloyd's generation to your generation, so that we can make change happen. Thank you.